Hey, tonight we're going to talk about magic mushrooms. Oregon is ready to open the door for the first legal psilocybin trips. All the pieces are in place from cap to stem. And that's our big story tonight. The legal psilocybin supply chain is now complete in Oregon. The Oregon Health Authority recently licensed the first lab and service center. So here's how everything's going to work. Licensed manufacturers will grow the mushrooms. Then they'll send samples to a licensed lab to test it to make sure it's the right species. That testing will also show how potent the mushroom is. After getting the data from the lab, the grower can then sell the mushrooms to a licensed service center. That's the name of the place where you're going to eat or ingest the mushrooms. A licensed facilitator there will help guide you through the effects of psilocybin. You do not need a prescription or medical referral to do that, but you do have to be 21 or older. And no, you can't buy the mushrooms and take them home and have them on your pizza. You have to use them right there at the service center. Now, why would you do this? Well, here's some possible benefits. According to the Oregon Health Authority, they say that research suggests the compound may help with depression, anxiety, trauma, and addiction. They go on to say that studies have found that magic mushrooms can also increase spiritual well-being. This is the nation's first legal regulatory framework on psilocybin. It's a process that's been in the works for more than 2 years. It started back in 2020 when Oregon voters passed Measure 109 with 55% of the vote. That allowed the Oregon Health Authority to license and regulate the psilocybin industry. But then, in November of 2022, voters in 25 of Oregon's 36 counties said, no, you're not doing that here. They banned the industry, said, no, you're not welcome. Several cities then followed suit. Here on The Story, we've gone in depth with the first licensed manufacturer and facilitator of the program in Oregon, and we recently got a tour of the first and right now, only licensed lab that tests the mushrooms. Here we go. Rose City Labs is along Johnson Creek Boulevard in southeast Portland. It's not too far from the Clackamas Town Center. They got their start testing cannabis as that legal industry got up and running in Oregon. And now, along with pot, they test for things like asbestos, radon, lead, heavy metals, and as of this spring, psilocybin. The lab is owned by a guy named Daniel Hewson, who describes what he was feeling when he found out his psilocybin license was approved.
Oh, it was a sigh of relief because it was a little bit of a bumpy road in the beginning, but it was a sigh of relief. It was nice to understand that a little guy like me could make a difference in the whole world, and I think everybody should believe in themselves and should try, to be better, to help society, help somebody else. But yeah, it was exciting. It was almost like a wave of tears coming over me. It was a happy crying and type thing. It was overwhelming.
Yes, Hewson decided to get involved with psilocybin programs based on experiences that he had as a kid and his beliefs in alternative medicine.
It started with my grandmother when I was born. She started a cancer aid thrift shop in Grass Valley, California, and I spent a lot of time with people dying of cancer and problems. So I decided later in life, I actually ended up with cancer myself in 2004, and I just started to try alternative medicines, and then I ended up opening the laboratory, trying to do more research. And I prefer not to take some of these medications that are prescribed to you because, yeah, it may fix one thing, but causes 10 other problems with you. So now you have to take another pill, and it fixes one thing, but it causes 10 more. So you got 20 things wrong with you now when you only originally had one. Let's figure out what the problem is, the root cause with your original problem. If you're having heartburn, if you're having pain, or if you're having this, how can we fix that instead of just taking a pill?
And when it comes to navigating a brand new system like Oregon's psilocybin program, which has not been set up anywhere else in the country, so kind of a big deal, it's a pretty big leap of faith. You could say that these companies giving birth to the psilocybin industry are flying blind, but for Hewson, that's no problem.
My background actually comes from aircraft. I'm a pilot, a mechanic, journeyman aircraft machinist. Spent 23 years at Boeing, so very much understand regulation. I understand rules. I understand where things are going to be headed, and if we want to turn it into a legal industry, what that's going to look like.
So let's walk you through the process from the psilocybin coming into Rose City Labs to the results going out. And to help explain, we talked to the lab's senior research and development chemist, Bjorn Frucha.
First step is always for our samplers to essentially take a representative sample from the batch. They either go to the facility where the grow is happening, or the grower brings them the entire batch. We take samples from random spots within the mushroom batch to basically, in the end, have a fairly representative sample. This is what our samplers would put it in. They're mylar bags, they are non-gas permeable, and they're especially light proof, and those are the two things that protects the mushroom and keeps them in the same state as we received them. The first step after that, when it gets to the lab, is that we actually grind the entire sample that the sampler took into a fine powder.
When we got to the lab, they did not have any mushrooms containing psilocybin ready for grinding. So what you'll see is white button mushrooms being ground up, which they use as a baseline to ensure their machines are calibrated correctly.
We have a homogenized powdered version of essentially of the batch.
From there, a DNA extraction is done on the sample, which is then placed inside something called a speciation machine. It has a long fancy name with an acronym of PCR, but let's just leave it at that. That basically tells the team what species the sample comes from. If the DNA confirms it is in fact psilocybin cubensis, the only kind allowed in the state program, then it moves on to the next step, the HPLC machine, high-performance liquid chromatography. That basically gives the potency of the sample, how much psilocybin it contains. After that data is gathered, it's uploaded into the state system, and the results are emailed to both the manufacturer and the Oregon Health Authority. The lab tells us that if the OHA requests it, they can also test samples for pesticides or anything else that could be in there in order to ensure it is not contaminated. By the way, that grinder that you saw, if you were saying that kind of looks like my coffee grinder at home, yep, I'm told, very similar. Now, that was a very basic walkthrough of how things work there, by the way. You can only imagine all the scientific terms and processes that we left out, but you got it. Those are the basics. Rose City Lab owner Dan Hewson made it very clear that once a sample arrives at the lab, never leaves. They hold on to it for 30 days after testing is complete in case further testing is needed, and then it's destroyed. Hewson, of course, is a big believer. So we wanted to know what Hewson's message would be to people who want nothing to do with magic mushrooms.
Education. Science, that's what I'm about here at this lab. And with science, we have to learn and we have to study and we have to understand what we're doing. And before people get emotional or don't understand, I would prefer that people would just do a little education. There's been studies from the government, there's been all kinds of things proving that psychedelics has been beneficial. My opinion, I think we're going to see the government accept psychedelics before they're going to ever accept cannabis.
Really?
That's my belief. I've been saying that for years now. And what I've noticed with people getting a hold of the lab or me, most people are up in their age, 60 and above, that don't use drugs, don't use alcohol, and they want to use psilocybin. They believe in it. And it's, for me, that's a little bit hard to understand it, but because it's a psychoactive, mind-altering drug, but I think they've seen or heard or witnessed or know people that it's really helped and changed and affected.
We visited a few weeks ago, shortly after they got their first licensed psilocybin sample. They told us they expected 2 more samples the following week, and this week they say they're actively testing licensed product. Remember, the lab is just one cog in the state's regulatory machine, but now all those pieces are in place for the machine. Manufacturers, the lab, facilitators, and so far, a single service center. That service center is called Epic Healing Eugene. The boutique-style healing center will serve up to 30 people each month with individual and small group sessions. And by the way, it's not cheap. The latest prices that we found online from earlier this week showed a level 1 microdose costing $500. And that's just for the services. If you read the last paragraph, it says the price does not include the cost of the actual mushrooms, which must be paid in cash. And the cost for the mushrooms themselves is not yet available. So the next question for those of you who are interested might be, okay, when's this all available? Well, Epic Healing has a wait list you can sign up for right now. Sam Chapman, the executive director of the group called Healing Advocacy Fund, told us that he expects them to begin seeing clients in just a few weeks. He also said more of these licensed service centers will be coming on before the end of the year.
By the end of this year, we expect to see as many as a dozen service centers licensed and serving clients, providing a new path for so many to address their depression, anxiety, and addiction, all mental health problems that are unfortunately far too prevalent here in Oregon.
If you'd like to learn more about psilocybin and psychedelics in general, you won't have to go far. PsychCon, a psychedelic convention, is coming to the Oregon Convention Center next week. They label themselves as the premier conference and trade show for the booming psychedelic industry. There will be all kinds of speakers, including former NBA player Lamar and LA Laker Lamar Odom, as well as folks from Rose City Labs that you've heard from today, owner Dan Hewson and chemist Bjorn Frucha. So, what do you think about Oregon's psilocybin program now that it's officially up and running? Do you think it's something that you might try? Or is cost an issue for you? Or maybe you don't want anything to do with it? Send us an email, will you? The address is thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090.